Venture investment strategies vary widely, but they all have one thing in common: a clear view of the long-term changes that will catapult a tiny startup into a billion-dollar valuation. Big secular trends like mobile, social, and the cloud are examples. My next guest says we're moving toward the Internet of Everything, where all of our real-world experiences are mapped digitally. That idea has guided his investments in companies like Mint and iFi. Rob Coneybeer is the managing director at Shasta Ventures and joins us here in the studio. Rob, welcome to Bloomberg West.
Thanks for having me.
So what exactly do you mean by the Internet of Things?
So if you think about the real world that we live in, it's much more than the laptops and the PCs and the servers and the smartphones that we have. It's everything else that we do in our everyday life. It's when we go out and exercise. It's when we park our cars. It's when we try to make ourselves better through healthcare, et cetera. How you bring those sensors, how you bring those devices into the internet and make your life better.
Now, you just raised your third fund, $265 million. How are you looking to spend this money? We know there are more startups out there than ever before, but how do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Well, the key thing that we look for is we look for great entrepreneurs, great ideas, huge ideas, ideas that change the world. Three sectors that we focus on is we focus on consumer internet, we focus on software as a service and really building on the cloud theme, and then mobile and wireless and how that's impacting all these areas.
How often do you find an idea, though, that changes the world?
We see a lot of ideas. I'd say that probably in any given year in Silicon Valley, there are hundreds of exciting, particularly exciting ideas. I'd say in any given year, there's probably about 10 companies that really have a chance to break out. And one of our objectives is to be an investor and a backer of one of these great companies that breaks through each year.
What's a company you're invested in right now that you think could change the world?
One company that we invested in recently called Relayrides is an early leader in the peer-to-peer car sharing area.
This is like a competitor to Zipcar and Get Around and those kind of companies, right?
I would say they're an absolute leader in terms of allowing individuals to rent out their cars to other people. That's not something that Zipcar allows you to do today.
So this goes to that whole idea of collaborative consumption, using excess inventory or sharing excess inventory, right?
Exactly. So the idea that you might have somebody that wants to get a nicer car than they might be able to afford, they could buy a BMW instead of another brand, and then by renting out the car for, say, a week out of a month, they'd be able to afford a higher payment.
Let's talk a little bit about this fund that you recently raised. Obviously, we've seen a lot of market volatility recently, some delayed IPOs, Groupon and Zynga in particular. Did you have any difficulty raising this latest round in light of the more macroeconomic things going on?
Well, I'd say as a fund, and in terms of what we're doing, the way that investors in funds feel, there tends to be a very emotional feeling in terms of when they invest, because when we invest in these companies, it can be 6, 7, 8, 9 years until they become great businesses. So the way that investors feel about their portfolio often has an impact on the attitude they have in investing in earlier stage companies.
So how do you deal with that? You know, if a company like Groupon is having trouble even listing, and there were obviously a lot of high hopes for it. A lot of venture capitalists have, tens of millions of dollars invested in it. How do you, deal with that in terms of making decisions about what to invest in and how to spend that money?
We're looking forward. So we look forward 5, 6, 7 years into the future. So when we invest at the earliest stages, these are companies that'll be listing, companies that'll have outcomes 5 or 6 years. So instead of looking in the rearview mirror or looking at what's next to us, we're very focused on what we think is 6, 7 years out.
Now, you're also an investor in Gowalla. I want to talk a little bit about this intersection of mobile, social, and local, which I still think, there are a lot of companies out there that are trying to do it, and they're doing a good job, but these companies haven't quite changed the world yet, as you say. I mean, how do you think that this trend is going to play out? How is one company going to kind of monetize the immediacy of that mobile, social, local traffic?
Well, we think there are many ways to think about it. Gowalla was a very early entrant in the space, and they recently announced the product that they have that's coming that's becoming more of a travel guide. And that's a company that has really been a leader in that space. We also like location-based check-in services around a company called Red Robot. And what Red Robot has built is they built a game called Life is Crime. It's one of the top 20 grossing apps in the Android App Store right now. And it allows you, instead of checking in at real-world locations, to commit crimes, virtual crimes at real-world locations.
What's your view on social networking? We've talked with Mike Maples of Floodgate. He seems to think that Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn are it in terms of social networks. Nothing else is going to be able to break into that, and it's all going to be about some kind of next phase of social networking. Do you agree with that?
When we think about social networking, we think it's a lot like the adoption of the telephone. So telephone came along, and it wasn't just the telephone industry that the telephone enabled. Telephone enabled a whole series of other industries. So when you think about relay rides that I was talking about a moment ago, and you decide whether you want to rent your car out to somebody, by taking the social graph from Facebook, taking the social graph from LinkedIn or Instagram, overlaying it, you might say, I only want to rent my car to friends of friends. And it's the application of the social network to other industries that we think is profound, and we are actively investing against right now.
Interesting. All right. Rob Coneybeer of Shasta Ventures, thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
On Bloomberg West.